I swear it started with nothing, just a smile across the porch. Her house was always quiet, blinds half drawn, the kind of silence that makes you wonder what stories are buried inside. She was older, easily twice my age, but not in a way that made her seem distant. If anything, it made her presence sharper, like she had already lived through storms I couldn't name. The first time I saw her, she was struggling with groceries at the bottom of her steps. I offered to help, awkwardly too eager, but she just lifted one brow and let me carry the heavy bags inside. Her hands brushed mine when I set them on the counter, small touch, but enough to send heat running straight through my chest. Her name? Elise. And the first thing I learned was that she didn't waste words. I filled the silence with clumsy attempts at conversation, asking about the weather, the neighborhood, anything to keep her voice lingering in the air. She answered softly, almost like she was afraid of giving away too much. But there was something in the way her eyes held mine a second longer than necessary. Like she wanted to say something else but wouldn't. From that day on, I noticed everything about her. The way she folded her arms when she leaned against her porch railing. The way she always laughed with her mouth closed, as if even joy needed to be contained. And when she caught me watching once, she didn't look away, she smirked, like she knew exactly what was happening between us before I did. One evening, I found myself lingering outside too long, pretending to water the plants that didn't need it. Elise stepped onto her porch in a faded sweater, her hair tied back loosely, holding a cup of coffee like it was armor. The light caught the edge of her face, and for the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked tired. "Rough day?" I asked. Her eyes flicked over me, measuring, as if deciding whether to answer. Then, with the faintest curve of her lips, "You're dangerous." I froze. Dangerous? Me? A 20-something who could barely keep his voice steady around her? But she didn't stop there. She tilted her head, the smirk widening just enough to make my pulse jump. In the best way. That's when the air changed. I laughed. Too quickly, too nervously, trying to cover the fact that my throat had gone dry. "I'm not sure anyone's ever called me that before." "You shouldn't be sure of many things," she replied. Then she sipped her coffee, eyes steady on me, and the silence between us stretched so thin it almost broke. I should have gone back inside. I should have said goodnight. But I didn't. My feet stayed planted, and her gaze stayed locked, and suddenly I realized the danger wasn't in her words, it was in the possibility of what came next. Her porch light flickered once, briefly, as though the house itself was holding its breath. "Elise!" My voice cracked, softer than I meant. I didn't even know what I wanted to ask. She leaned on the railing, lips parting like she might finally tell me something that mattered, something I wasn't supposed to hear. My heart kicked hard, waiting, leaning forward as if the space between us was already shrinking. And then, a sharp knock rattled her front door. Her smirk disappeared. Her hand tightened around the mug. And before I could move, she whispered, almost to herself, "Not now." The sound of the second knock was louder. Urgent. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't the only one standing too close to danger. The knock on Elise's door echoed long after it stopped. She didn't open it. Whoever it was eventually gave up, but by then the moment between us had collapsed. She muttered something about people not understanding boundaries, and slipped inside, leaving me standing on my porch, restless, my skin buzzing with what almost happened. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the look in her eyes when she called me dangerous. It wasn't a joke. It was something else, like she was warning herself, not me. The next morning, I spotted her again, kneeling in her garden. I almost walked past, but she glanced up and waved me over. I knelt beside her, pretending I knew something about plants. "Never thought you were the type to wake up early," she said. Her voice had that dry humor tucked inside it, but her hands, delicate, steady, gave her away. She'd been awake long before me. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted before thinking. Her pause was small but sharp. She clipped a stem, eyes lowered. "Neither could I." I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I asked about the roses, and for a few minutes we hid inside the safety of small talk. It wasn't until later, sitting on her porch with 2 cups of coffee between us, that pieces of her past slipped through. She mentioned her late husband, just once, calling him Michael, but the way she said it told me she rarely did. The silence after his name was heavier than the summer heat. I almost apologized, but she shook her head. Don't. It's been 3 years. People stop asking after the first one. She gave a small, hollow laugh. But they still look at me like I'm unfinished. Her words hung there, and I felt them sink into me. Because she wasn't unfinished. She was, if anything, more alive than anyone else I knew. And maybe that's what pulled me in so fast. I told her about me too. How I'd moved here after dropping out of school. How my parents didn't talk to me much anymore. How I worked odd jobs, saving money without knowing for what. I expected her to judge me, but she didn't. She just tilted her head, her eyes softer than before. 22 and already drifting, she murmured. That's dangerous, too. The way she said it made my pulse trip again. But it wasn't just the age difference, it was what it meant. She was my neighbor, someone the whole street saw as respectable, guarded. I was the boy next door who should have been invisible to her. If anyone noticed the way I looked at her, the way she sometimes didn't look away fast enough, it would be over before it began. And yet, I couldn't stop. As the morning stretched, our silences grew longer. Comfortable, even. At one point, she brushed a strand of hair back, and her fingers grazed mine on the armrest. She didn't move them right away. Neither did I. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that touch. No words, no explanations, just the quiet admission of something both of us weren't ready to name. She pulled her hand back finally, but not before her thumb lingered half a second too long. Her eyes met mine, steady, unblinking. And in that silence I knew we'd already crossed further than either of us wanted to admit. The neighborhood wasn't built for secrets. Too many porches facing each other, too many eyes behind curtains. That thought hit me the next afternoon, when Elise invited me inside for coffee. It was innocent, technically. But nothing felt innocent about sitting in her living room, surrounded by photographs of a life I wasn't part of. A man with strong shoulders, her late husband, Michael, smiled from the frames. I tried not to stare, but his presence was everywhere, on the mantel, in the bookshelves, in the way Elise's hand brushed his old armchair without thinking. You don't have to look so guilty, she said softly. My head snapped up. I wasn't, you were. She smirked, but the edge of her voice wasn't playful this time. It's all right. Everyone does. They wonder what kind of woman I am now, alone. They wonder what I let myself miss. Her words landed heavy, sharper than she meant them to. My chest tightened, and before I could answer, the sound of a knock shattered the room. This time, it wasn't on her door, it was on mine. Through her open window, I heard my roommate calling. Hey, you here? Thought we were grabbing a beer. His voice was casual, but it felt like a spotlight. If he came closer, if he looked through the glass, I stood, panicked, but Elise caught my wrist. Just lightly. Not enough to hold me, but enough to stop me. Stay, she whispered. The word was small, but it burned through me. My roommate called once more, then the sound of footsteps faded. The silence that followed was deafening. Her hand was still on me. I didn't move. Elise, I started, but the name came out cracked, too raw. She let go suddenly, standing and moving to the kitchen. You should go before someone else notices. Her back was to me, but I could see the way her shoulders stiffened, the way she gripped the counter as if it could anchor her. I didn't leave. Not right away. Instead, I stepped closer, the air thick between us. Do you want me to? I asked. She turned then, slowly, her eyes catching mine. They weren't guarded anymore. They were wide, searching, almost afraid. Yes, she said. But it didn't sound like yes. My heart kicked against my ribs. We were too close now, both of us leaning into something neither of us had named out loud. I swear, if I'd moved an inch, if she'd tilted her head just slightly, the front door creaked open. We jumped apart like guilty kids. A neighbor's voice called from the hall. "Elise? Sorry, I let myself in. I brought those books you asked for." I stumbled back, nearly knocking over her coffee table. Elise pressed her hand to her chest, then forced a polite smile as the older woman walked in, chattering. Our eyes met once more, over the neighbor's shoulder. Hers were steady now, composed, but I could still feel the echo of her touch on my wrist. I left without a word, my pulse still racing. And for the first time, I realized we weren't just playing with silence anymore. We were playing with fire. Days passed, but I couldn't shake the image of Elisa's hand on my wrist. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again, the hesitation, the pull, the unspoken "don't go." We avoided each other for a while. Or maybe she avoided me. Curtains drawn, porch empty, no more accidental meetings in the garden. But then one evening, just before the sky folded into dusk, I saw her again. She was standing on her porch, wineglass in hand, staring at nothing. I almost walked past. Almost. But she turned at the sound of my steps. And instead of closing herself off, she said my name. The way she said it, low, almost breaking, pulled me straight up those steps. "You've been avoiding me," I said. Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Maybe I thought it was safer." "For you?" I asked. "For both of us." The air between us was charged, heavier than I could stand. I shoved my hands in my pockets, desperate to hold myself together. "You think I don't know what this looks like? What people would say? Do you?" Her voice sharpened suddenly. "Because I hear them already. The whispers when I walk past. 'Poor widow,' they say. 'Poor woman who doesn't know how to be alone.'" Her hand trembled slightly as she raised the glass to her lips. I caught it, quick, before she spilled. My fingers closed over hers, steadying. Her eyes darted to mine. And in that instant, everything cracked. "You think I don't hear the whispers either?" I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "That I'm too young, too lost, too stupid to know what I want?" "You're wrong." The words hung there, heavy, irreversible. Her breath caught, lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. The silence was unbearable. So I filled it. "I think about you," I admitted, each word like a stone lifted from my chest. "Too much. More than I should. I can't." My throat closed, but I forced it open. "I can't stop." Her glass slipped from her hand, landing softly on the porch boards, rolling away. She didn't even notice. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and raw, as if I had just shattered a wall she'd spent years building. She took one step closer. Then another. Her breath brushed my face, warm and uneven. "This is wrong," she whispered, but the words had no weight. My pulse hammered. I leaned in, just slightly, enough that I could see the faint scar above her lip, the one I'd never noticed before. "Then tell me to stop." Her mouth trembled. Her hand lifted, almost against her will, fingers brushing the back of my neck. "Elise," I breathed. And then, a phone rang inside her house. Loud. Jarring. Pulling us both back from the edge. She froze, hands still on me, eyes burning with everything unspoken. The ringing didn't stop. Neither did we. The phone kept ringing, sharp and unrelenting. Elise pulled her hand away from me like the heat had burned. She turned, fumbling through the door, and I followed without thinking. She grabbed the receiver, voice steady only on the surface. "Hello?" I stood frozen by the threshold, pulse still hammering. A pause. Then her face drained of color. "No, this isn't. Who gave you this number?" I'd never seen her look like that before. Not guarded, not smirking, terrified. She slammed the phone down so hard it rattled the table. For a long moment she didn't move, her shoulders shaking. "Elise?" My voice cracked in the heavy silence. She turned slowly, her eyes glassy, her hands trembling. "That was Michael's brother. The name hit me like a stone. Her late husband's brother. He knows, she whispered, barely audible. He said he's been watching. That people have been talking. My stomach dropped. Watching? What does that mean? Her laugh was bitter, hollow. It means nothing is safe anymore. Not the porch. Not the garden. Not even this house. She pressed a hand to her forehead, pacing. God, I was so stupid. I stepped forward, desperate to ground her. You weren't stupid. Yes, I was. She snapped it, then softened immediately. I let you in. I let myself. She stopped, biting down on the words like they were poison. I wanted to reach for her, but the look in her eyes warned me back. Shame, regret, fear, all tangled. Elise, what did he say exactly? She met my gaze, finally. He said, if I don't stop this, he'll tell everyone. The family, the neighbors. And he'll make sure I regret it. The room spun. Suddenly the attraction, the smirks, the late-night talks, they weren't just dangerous. They were a loaded gun pointed at both of us. So what? I said, my voice rising despite myself. We just pretend this doesn't exist? Pretend I don't think about you every damn day? Her lips parted, trembling. You think I don't? The words hit me harder than I expected. She broke eye contact immediately, but it was too late. The truth was out. We stood there, breaths ragged, the air between us alive with everything we tried to bury. Then she said it, the words I hadn't prepared for. If you care about me, you'll stay away. It cut deeper than anything Michael's brother could have said. I shook my head, unable to accept it. No. Don't put this on me. Her voice cracked. It's already on you. On us. You're too young to lose everything for someone like me. Don't tell me what I can lose. My fists clenched, but not in anger, just to keep myself from shaking. Don't tell me what I feel. Her eyes glistened, tears held back with sheer force. She looked at me like she wanted to close the space between us, like she wanted to undo her own words. But instead, she turned away, staring at Michael's photograph on the mantel. And in that moment, I realized the real danger wasn't the whispers. It was that she might actually listen to them. The next day I told myself I wouldn't go over. That I'd respect her words, respect the silence. But by nightfall, I was standing outside her door again, palms sweating, heart pounding. I didn't even knock. I just stood there, staring at the wood, willing myself to turn back. Then the door opened. Elise stood there, hair loose, eyes tired but alert, like she'd been expecting me. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know, I answered. And neither of us moved. Finally, she stepped aside. I walked in. The house was darker than usual. Only one lamp lit in the corner. It cast shadows across the room, shadows that seemed to press us closer together. She leaned against the table, arms crossed, trying to look composed. But her hands gripped her elbows too tightly. Michael's brother called again, she said after a pause. He thinks I'm reckless. He thinks you're using me. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Is that what you think? Her gaze flickered, conflicted. I think. She trailed off, biting her lip. I think I'm terrified of what it means that I don't want to let you go. The words dropped between us like a spark to dry kindling. I moved closer before I could stop myself. Then don't. Her laugh was sharp, broken. You make it sound simple. It is. My voice cracked. I don't care if people talk. I don't care if he watches. Elise, I can't pretend this isn't real anymore. I want you. Her breath caught, shallow and uneven. She closed her eyes, shaking her head like she wanted to block me out, but tears slipped down her cheeks instead. You're too young, she whispered. You'll regret this. You'll wake up one day and hate me for holding you back. I reached out, catching her trembling hand. Or I'll wake up one day and regret not fighting for you when I had the chance. Her eyes flew open, searching mine, desperate and afraid all at once. Why would you risk everything? Because, I said, my throat raw. You're the only thing that makes me feel like I'm not drifting. For a moment, silence swallowed us. Just her tears, just my shaking breath. And then, slowly, her hand tightened around mine. She stepped closer. Close enough that her forehead brushed against mine, her voice barely a thread. You are dangerous, she murmured again. Because you make me want to live. I closed my eyes, the weight of everything between us pressing down. We didn't kiss. We didn't break. We just stood there, holding on like the world outside had already judged us guilty. And maybe it had. But in that fragile moment, we chose truth over silence. Whether it would last, whether it would burn us both down, I didn't know. All I knew was that she didn't let go. 4 days after that night, nothing felt the same. The neighborhood still looked ordinary, the trimmed hedges, the polite waves from across the street, but under the surface, it felt like everything was watching us. Or maybe it was just me, carrying the weight of what we'd finally admitted. Elise and I didn't talk much about Michael's brother again. She told me she'd handle it, her voice steadier than her hands. But I knew the truth, part of her fear wasn't him, or the neighbors, or anyone else. It was herself. She wasn't used to letting anyone see her cracks, and I'd seen too many of them. And yet she kept letting me in. Sometimes it was simple. Sharing coffee in silence on her porch. Walking side by side down the street at dusk, not touching, but close enough that our shoulders almost brushed. Other times it was harder. Like when she looked at me too long, then looked away as if reminding herself of the years between us. Or when I caught myself wondering what my friends would say if they knew, and hating myself for caring. The thing was, either of us had an easy answer. But we had chosen something anyway, not to pretend anymore. One evening, as the sun sank low and the air turned soft with crickets, she invited me in again. No excuses, no hesitation. I followed her into the dim light of her kitchen, where the table was set with 2 glasses, 1 bottle of wine. I don't want to keep running, she said finally, sitting down and gesturing for me to do the same. Not from him, not from them, not from myself. Her honesty hit me harder than any confession. I sat across from her, watching the way she held the glass like it was both shield and anchor. You don't have to run, I said. Not if I'm here. She smiled then, small and tired but real. You make it sound so simple. I reached across the table, fingers brushing hers. Maybe it is. Maybe we're the ones making it complicated. For a long moment, she didn't answer. She just let my hand rest on hers, the silence wrapping around us like a fragile promise. And in that silence, I realized something. It didn't matter if the world thought it was wrong. It mattered that, for once, we both felt seen. The future was still uncertain. Maybe we'd burn out. Maybe Michael's brother would stir more trouble. Maybe people would talk until the weight of it broke us. But sitting there, watching her laugh softly for the first time in weeks, I knew I'd choose the risk again and again. Because some things are worth the fire. And as she lifted her glass, clinking it lightly against mine, she whispered, almost playfully, "Dangerous." But this time, I didn't flinch. I just smiled back. Because for the first time, dangerous felt like the safest place I'd ever been.